So today is about animal styles in martial arts. Most famous, this is from Chinese martial arts, but it also occurs in other Asian martial arts like silat. Maybe, as you will see when I go through the content of this video, maybe the similar concepts have been used throughout history in other places as well. I'm not going to go into wild-ass conspiracy theories here. There's a pretty rational, concrete story here, so just stay with me, okay? Now, the origin of animal styles in Chinese martial arts, the story is usually that Bodhisattva, oh, I'm slaughtering the pronunciation. He studied the movements of animals and taught this to the monks who were out of shape and they needed to defend themselves. And of course that's a complete myth. I'm not saying that it's not even possible to say if it's untrue, because it's on a level where you just can't say. There's no evidence to support it, but whatever, it's a nice story. Now there are other stories or theories as to why animal styles in martial arts arose, whether it was studying the movements of animals to learn tactics or power generation or whatever. Now my personal theory actually relates more to the topic of possession. Now this already, I think maybe you can see some of you going like, Jesus, no, seriously, possession. Not dissimilar to possession like in exorcism possession, but when you talk about possession in scientific terms, you're talking about something called an altered state of consciousness, and where another entity or persona or perceived entity supersedes your own. This is as opposed to what is called general reality orientation, which is like the normal everyday way of behaving that you and I relate to the world, not being possessed, or at least usually not possessed. I don't think I'm possessed now. So anyways, and the reason I'm bringing this up is because, first of all, I have actually seen people do martial arts while going into trance, which is at least relatively close to this concept of being possessed. It is a altered state of consciousness. Now, just before we go further, there's of course a plethora of ways of achieving altered states of consciousness. In many ways, people actually take drugs to achieve altered states of consciousness. This is and there's all these trance states that shamans do and all this. I'm no expert in that, but just there's a whole lot of ways people do it. Now I'm going to connect this to one specific way, and it's going to be probably going to surprise a few of you, because this was through a lecture held by a friend of mine who unfortunately died last fall, Larsson. He held a lecture where he said basically that deep immersion role-playing is indistinguishable from possession. Now, basically he said that you are by acting, taking on the mannerisms, maybe the clothes, the movements and everything, and the way of thinking of a certain persona. If you are going deep enough into this, you are in fact becoming that person. And this is not dissimilar to what you see in extreme method acting and stuff like this. And what he basically says is that this is indistinguishable from possession. Now, I'm just going to assume, for the sake of this video, that what he says is that this theory is true. Now, if this is true, if we're just going to assume that deep immersion role-playing is similar, or at least in fact indistinguishable from possession. Now, what is it that you're actually doing when you're doing animal martial arts, at least in many cases? Now, granted, in modern times this have diversified, so Not everybody who is doing animal style martial arts today are trying to do this. But in many ways what you're doing is essentially you're trying to take on the mannerisms of a animal. You are moving like an animal. Some styles actually, if you see, they're doing more than just fighting like an animal. They're doing, you see some of the monkey stuff, and they're actually doing stuff like this, which doesn't have any combat applications. This is just trying to be more like the monkey. And the idea here is that if you manage to go and become, to really try to become the monkey, then you are in fact possessed by the monkey, or at least it would be indistinguishable from being possessed by the monkey. And now the question is, why would you do something like this? Because what does it really give you that fighting without possession doesn't give? Now, of course, being possessed by the monkey does not give you things like, we're not like Marshall Bravestar, if you remember the comic or the animated series. It's not like strength of the bear, speed of the puma. No, you're not getting the physical characteristics of the animal. You may, because possession is an altered state of consciousness, and that is not completely dissimilar from some levels of psychosis, you may be perceived as stronger, but that's more actually to do with you not holding back, because actually most people hold back. And everybody who's taught reality-based self-defense knows that if you get a beginner, basically the first start is to get them to actually hit as hard as they can, because most people don't want to do that. They actually don't have it in them, so you have to bring that out in them. So that, of course, would be something that you could bring out through this, but this you could bring out in a lot of other ways, a lot less taxing ways. Now, actually, the reason I think it has to do with modern war psychology. Again, you may think that I'm already, you're out on the ledge here. No, seriously. There is two things that have been a big worry for modern day war psychology, and that was that after World War II, I believe it was World War II, but I'm pretty sure it was, that the American armed forces realized that actually about 20%, only about 20% of their soldiers were actually shooting at the enemy, trying to kill them. The rest of them were just either not shooting or just firing in the air or doing relatively useless stuff compared to trying to kill the enemy. I mean, in a war context. And of course this was a huge problem for them, because that meant in order to have 200 useful soldiers in battle, you had to, field 1,000 to get 200 to shoot, to actually do the real thing that you wanted them to do. And this is logistical and cost-wise really big problem. So they actually spent a lot of time trying to solve this problem, and they have found lots of ways: reality-based training, more aliveness-based drills, all this stuff. And the last thing I heard, I think they're at like 80 or 90% currently what they are reporting. Anyways, the point is that they found out ways to deal with this. And the thing is that this is not a completely new phenomenon. It's not like people all of a sudden in 1940 started having trouble shooting at people. No. We found actually from the American Civil War, you found rifles in archaeological digs that were loaded several times and never fired. So this is something and this was because of course they're standing on the line, so if you would shoot or not, nobody would really notice. And the point is that this has been a problem throughout history, and people have been aware of it. Now the point is that through possession, you are enabling yourself to do things that you maybe, as the human you, would not be able to do. So you actually, what you're doing is you're saying that the animal, the tiger or the monkey or something, that the animal can kill and do all these brutal, not only kill, but these really brutal things, tearing people up, and battle before, in days prior to firearms, were not less brutal. I mean, it's at least as mentally challenging to go into combat with knives and swords and spears as it is with rifles. So this was still a problem to get people to do that. So if you can get into another persona which didn't have that problem, then you would solve that issue. And simultaneously, you have on the other end of the spectrum, when you're going to re-enter the people you have conditioned to be able to kill, into society, it has been shown throughout history that sometimes you've had some trouble with that, and you've had people who have had PTSD and all this stuff, kinds of diagnosis where they actually have trouble readjusting into civil society because they actually they are still in that mindset, which is very unuseful to civil society. And here's the thing: if you are being possessed, if you are being a different person or a different animal, if you like, then you are creating a psychological barrier, which is a coping mechanism for handling that. So it actually wasn't you who did those things, it was somebody else. It was the animal, it was a tiger that did that, it wasn't me. Now this might seem like you're actually just pushing the blame, not taking responsibility for your actions, but in fact these coping mechanisms are pretty basic, and I think they're, as far as I know, they're pretty well covered in psychology. I'm not a psychologist, by the way, absolutely not, but I read quite a bit on the subject, and as I understand, this is pretty common coping mechanism. Now, I said in the beginning that maybe this wasn't only specific to Chinese or Asian martial arts. We know it's not specific only to Chinese, but I think that the concept may have been also in parts of Europe. Even because if you look at things like, now of course I'm a little bit on the speculating side here. If you look at things like berserker, what does the word mean? Bärsärk. It means to wear the hide of a bear. So actually you could say that at least, maybe not possessed by the bear, but at least getting into a possession-like alternate state of consciousness would bring you in to be a more ferocious combatant. And that maybe this was how they did it. I of course do not know this, but this is just speculation based on the same concepts. And you have stories of exlain and several other people going into trances like this across the world. So if we just assume that this is the similar concept, then we could say that basically you would have the same idea all across the world, because it's a pretty basic and simple thing. I mean, and the idea of possession is at least not specific to just Asia. You have recollections of possessions, similar altered states of consciousness throughout history in many parts of the world. So, to bring it to a conclusion, my theory is that actually the concept of animal martial arts started, or at least had parts of it started, as a way of achieving possession by an animal, or animal spirit, or how you want to deal with the same concepts that modern day warfare psychology deals with. And that it actually was not from the beginning just a way of achieving fighting techniques. Now, it may have evolved from or evolved into that as well. So I'm not saying that it was only that and it was never ways of fighting like it, because it would be probably, in fact, if you're going to do this, it would be useful to, if you're always fighting in one way, then that you didn't have to change it, that this would be your natural way also when you're not in a trance. Alright, so let me know what you think of my theory, and I hope you think I was not completely far out there. Alright? Thank you, bye bye.